So we're on page 56 now, and we're going to be reading advantages and disadvantages of each renewable source of energy that we talked about before. Okay, so we're starting off with solar energy. So the main advantage of solar energy is that it requires no fuel for it to work and it produces no pollution. The disadvantages are that solar panels occupy a very large area. They require a high capital investment, which means that when you want to purchase a solar panel system, a photovoltaic system, it's rather expensive, especially if you're going to buy a system for your house. They can be quite expensive, even though the more the technology is improving, the prices are starting to get a bit cheaper. And the last disadvantage is that they cannot be used in countries with very cloudy climates. Okay, so this does not apply obviously at all to Malta. We are a country that has quite a lot of sunlight. Okay, so it makes photovoltaic system solar power very advantageous to us. And with regards to the large area, when you compare the size of each photovoltaic panel and you compare how much energy they create, they do have to take up quite a large area. In fact, if you were to compare an average sized home, an average sized house at least that can have, let's say, 5 people living in it, if it were to have its roof covered with solar panels, or at least having at least one system, because there is a limit to how large the system can be in a home, it will not even be able to produce enough electricity for those 5 people to use without having to purchase any extra electricity. Moving on, so the second one is biomass. The main advantages of biomass is that it can be used to dispose of unwanted waste. Like we said, biomass is made whenever there are landfills, and as you know, a landfill is basically an area where we decide we want to dump all our waste, all our rubbish. Now, instead of just dumping the rubbish there, if we were to make biomass out of it, then at least out of that waste we would at least be getting something in return. The main disadvantage, it requires huge areas of land to grow sufficient plant material. Okay, so in the case that we're mentioning now, we are saying that there are sometimes plants that are purposely grown. So people would have fields or they would have land, okay, that they would purposely grow crops to eventually turn into biomass. So to get that, you need huge areas of land to grow these plants. The next disadvantage for biomass is that a warm climate is needed for biomass materials to break down. Okay, heat is required for this waste to break down and turn into biomass. Once again, this makes Malta ideal for us to use, because we do have a relatively warm climate when compared to other countries. Okay, our winters can get a bit harsh, however, overall, we still have a relatively warm climate. Okay, next up, wind. So with wind power, once again, we have no need for any fuel to be used. We are not burning anything, and it creates no air pollution. The main problem with wind power is that it does require a very large area. Like I said, you will not have just one wind turbine. Okay, so you would need to have what is called a wind farm, which would be a huge stretch of land. It can be over the sea. It could be built on normal land, but it would require a large area. They are also relatively noisy, okay, as the wind passes by the blades, which makes them spin. Okay, they do generate an amount of sound, which is not very nice to listen to, especially if you live close by. Okay, then you will get this constant humming sound all the time. They are also relatively unsightly, so imagine a beautiful view of the sea or of a large stretch of land with greenery and fields and trees and such, and then coming out of the stand you would get these large poles with turbines sticking on them, and they can be relatively unsightly, and they are quite an eyesore, especially when you have more than one. That is the main problem, because you will have more than one. Okay. They also definitely cannot work when there is no wind. If they are wind turbines, they definitely need wind. Just like photovoltaic cells cannot be used in countries with cloudy climates. Well, if there is no wind, the wind turbine will not spin and it will not generate electricity. Which means, even in countries where there are wind turbines, as long as there is wind, you get electricity from them, and that's fine. However, when there is less wind, or no wind at all, then you would still have to have another source of energy to sort of as a sort of backup. Okay, you cannot rely solely on wind energy. You will always need another source. And finally, with regards to wind power, they are found to disturb bird colonies. This is interesting because abroad, where there are these wind farms, they have found that migratory birds that migrate over whole countries and across continents from Europe down to Africa, they have found to be disturbed by these wind turbines. Now, it could be having to do with the fact that birds have a sort of internal compass so that they can figure out which way is north and which way is south. So if they pass by an area where there are these large wind turbines, that might have something to do with their internal compasses being messed up. It can also be the sound, the constant sound that we mentioned before, that might disrupt them. But either way, it is found, you're definitely known to disturb bird colonies. So it has a bit of a negative impact on the environment in that way.